Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Run It Back, the show where we try to get things right the second time. In today's episode, we're going to be going over a Ravnica remix draft that is new on Magic Arena for the next week or so. We can see here that it was a premier draft, best of one, and of course, we had a record of 7-2 in the draft. Very happy to see that. As you can also see here, we've got our pack, and we'll dive into it now. As we look into Pack 1, Pick 1, we can see a couple of things that are exciting. One note, we start with MKM, which is the most recent Ravnica set. We're going to move into Guilds of Ravnica and also Ravnica Allegiance in Packs 2 and 3. It's pretty easy to look here at this pack and see Doppelgang as the best card, right? Simic has been around for a long time, but this is a pretty easy one to splash as we kind of move up the food chain. This could go into an Azorius shell, splash green. More than likely, it'll be a green-based shell in either, Temur or Sultai or something like that. Splashing the blue because green is the easiest one to find fixing. Moving on to Pack 1, Pick 2, we had a couple of good options. One was a Detective Satchel, which is a perfect thing to be doppelganging. Also, we have a Chalk Outline, which is a great doppelgang target as well. But the Flourishing Bloom Kid, I thought was going to be a pretty easy one to disguise, pretty much no matter how many colors we were playing, and then flip up for a Singleton Green, which should allow us to go find some additional forests, get us to 7 mana when that happens, and then hopefully play another land and easily be able to doppelgang a turn early. Pack 1, Pick 3, I was really disappointed in everything else in the pack. Yes, inside sources here, but I don't think that sort of thing is as helpful when the decks are going to be less streamlined. We want to go with as much value as possible, so we had a pretty easy pick here in a Killer Among Us. 5 mana for 6 power worth of creatures. This card turned out to be awesome as expected. Lots of blockers, lots of attackers. Was great. Pack 1, Pick 4, things started to get a little interesting here. We kind of looked at Vengeful Creeper as just a 5/5 or 5, but that's not always easy to come by. And necessarily a 5/5 for 5 doesn't win the battlefield like it did in MKM. I know later on we're going to see some Gruul cards that sometimes you just got a 5/5 for 5 on top of other things, right? Which is good. And so as we looked into seeing what we were going to do here, we were base green, potentially able to splash something. Moving into packs 2 and 3, I don't know if the fixing is nearly as good because they kind of wanted you to move into one guild rather than splash a couple of them. So I wanted to grab this Public Thoroughfare now to make sure that we had the splash available to us. The only other thing that we looked at was Out Cold, and this would need to be more of an aggressive shell. We're going for a big mana sort of ramp strategy, and Out Cold probably didn't play as well as it could have, even though it was still good. Pack 1, Pick 5, we did look at an Illicit Masquerade, which is a very, very interesting one. This would have been perfect if we'd ended up taking that Chalk Outline in Pack 1, Pick 2, but we saw a Rebel Belt Maverick, and even though we didn't go down that Chalk Outline road, Rebel Belt Maverick's still a great card, right? You get in here and you do Surveil too, so that way you can fix for mana or not, that kind of stuff, and then eventually also ends up coming back out of the graveyard for a 1/1 counter. As a sorcery, there's things later, particularly in the Simic Guild, that care about having 1/1 counters on them, and then you sometimes either get Trample or Flying or something like that, and so using this to activate those abilities could be very powerful. Pack 1, Pick 6, this is the first time where I felt, that the green card was inherently not as good as the other cards. And so Fanatical Strength, perfectly fine, but nothing really to write home about, particularly in a deck where we're not really going aggressive on it. The other cards that we'd be looking for were like a Sanitation Automaton. So we just took the best card, the Soul Innervation, a removal spell that maybe had a little bit of extra text on it. Pack 1, Pick 7, we saw a second Killer Among Us. I don't know what this pack was missing in order to still have a Killer Among Us in the pack, but we were very happy to be taking it. 2 of these in the same deck, along with potentially more with Doppelgang. It was busted. It was super good. Loved every second of it. Pack 1, Pick 8. We were debating between a Rakish Scoundrel and a Fairy Snoop. We could be moving more into black-green, but we have a singular black card, which might even be worth the splash. Pack 1, Pick 9, we did see that they went this way wheeled, and we instantly snapped it up. The other cards were fine. Airtight Alibi definitely seems like it would have been good, but I'm really, really happy to see this. They went this way. It plays really well of moving into the Killer Among Us, and while also getting us to Doppelgang a turn earlier. Pack 1, Pick 10, we did get this Riftburst Hellion. We were kind of thinking about it the first time around. As we can see, obviously, all of the other uncommons did not come back to us. Pack 1, Pick 11, we did end up getting a Rakish Scoundrel here. Pack 1, Pick 12, a Mortipede. And Pack 1, Pick 13, agency corners. Pack 2, pick 1. We open up a Planeswalker. Planeswalkers are busted. There's not many in MKM, but there were lots earlier on. And so we see Domri. We were going to play Domri. Definitely worth a splash for us as we're base green into something else. And so being able to add a 1/1 counter onto things or give some things haste. Pack 2, pick 2. We saw an Amplifier, which I thought was fine. We didn't really have any crazy creature cards, so we were looking at splashing the Domri at this moment, and Gruul Gilgate came by, so I figured we'd go ahead and pick this one up on the hopes that maybe either the Feral Macha or even better the Territorial Boar might come back to us. Pack 2, pick 3, we looked at a breeding pool. We also saw a Galloping Lizrog amongst a couple other things, but we ended on the breeding pool mainly because we had this Flourishing Bloom Kid, which allows us to go get 2 forest cards, and even though a Simic Guildgate taps for both blue and green, it is not considered a forest, but the Flourishing Bloom Kid would go get a breeding pool and place it onto the battlefield tapped, which I think is particularly strong. So the ability to kind of have those things early while also being able to go fetch them late for Doppelgang, this just was too much to pass up, and I was happy to pick it up here. Pack 2, pick 4, we finally moved into that red-green strategy. I did look at Zertok Goblin. I also looked at Frenzied Airings, and amongst other things in the pack. Even like a Chillbringer was particularly good, and Skatewing Spy also good here. But being able to sort of cast either of these cards was going to be great, and I think we were moving more into a red-green splash blue strategy. I did not think that the Zertok Goblin was going to realistically be castable on 2, so I decided to go with the Frenzied Airings. Pack 2, pick 5, I stared at this Frilled Mystic for what seemed like forever. I even looked at this Code of Constraint, and I just thought that the Frilled Mystic with the double blue on 4 was going to be unrealistic for us to cast. You know, if we were going to be looking at something else, it was certainly possible for us to be casting this at, you know, turns 5, 6, or 7, but I really think that Frilled Mystic's power comes from being able to deploy some threats early, having somebody trying to catch up with one big creature or answer like a board wipe, and then you end up Frilled Mysticking that one thing, swinging in for another major chunk of damage. And I just didn't think we were realistically going to be able to cast it. I thought this was definitely going to be something that would stick in our hand forever. So we went with the Rebel Belt Runner. A 3/3 for 3 is perfectly fine in most formats. Pack 2, pick 6, I kind of looked at the pack, and yeah, although there's a couple of fun-ish cards in through here, I looked down at my deck, and we didn't really have any 2-drops, because both Doppelgang and Flourishing Bloom Kid, not a 2-drop, right? We do have a 1-drop in Rebel Belt Maverick, which certainly helps with some of the speed bumps, but like, if we're morphing things on 3, like, this is not gonna, we're gonna get run over by some Boros build. So I wanted to get this Territorial Boar. I thought it played really well with things like the Frenzied Airings, so eventually as we move into like the Riftburst Hellion, that kind of stuff, it turned out great. Pack 2, pick 7. Nothing really exciting in this pack with the exception of this Rampaging Rendhorn. This is the only thing that we're really hit by, and especially coming after the Territorial Boar. Playing this as a 4/4 haster on 5 or as a 5/5. Both options are great. Happy to see them. Happy to pick it up. Pack 2, pick 8. We were looking at a couple things like this Gore Clan Wrecker or the Rebel Belt Recluse. You know, either of these cards are fine, but still seeing another Territorial Boar in the pack and really fleshing out that 2-drop slot, I think that was a really good move for us. And so I was happy to pick this one up. It turned out great. Pack 2, pick 9 on the wheel. Nothing really exciting in the pack, so we did take a Rebel Slinger. We were pretty weak to flyers overall, and so having this for Afterlife tokens or other flyers that might come into from Azorius, I thought this was good. We did look at the Forbidding Spirit, but just 2 white is just too much to pay in our deck. Pack 2, pick 10, we had a Wrecking Beast amongst a Boar here. I even also looked at this Rumbling Ruin, and I didn't think that we were going to have too many +1/+1 counters, and having this thing just sit as a 6/6 for 6 on the battlefield, not as good as having a 6/6 for 6 with haste, or a 7/7 for 7 here. Pack 2, pick 11, we saw second Rampaging Rendhorn. Happy to pick that one up, but unfortunately as we look, we're looking at a pretty hefty 5-drop slot with 2 Killer Among Us and 2 Rampaging Rendhorns. I did really felt comfortable, more comfortable with the They Went This Way, moving into some of our power on 5. That felt really strong, and so I was happy to pick this up, happy to play it. Pack 2, pick 12, we got an Act of Treason. This is more of a sideboard card, which unfortunately we're not using. Pack 2, pick 13, we did get a Code of Constraint, which I thought was pretty good. Pack 2, pick 14, we ended up taking the Rebel Belt Recluse. Pack 3, pick 1. We opened a Mythic, which is super sweet and fun, but not one that we're going to use. We kind of looked at Disdainful Stroke as a possibility, but ended more on League Guild Mage, mainly just because this is something we could end up casting, but then also just having something on the battlefield when we had lots of mana, used our Ram spell, and hadn't really drawn into anything. Being able to 4 mana draw a card, this is great. We also had dreams of copying Doppelgang, but it's just better to make X bigger for Doppelgang than it is to actually copy it. Pack 3, pick 2, we looked at the Inescapable Blaze, dealing 6 damage to any target, can't be countered. But that was just a little too much mana for me, right? Like, we were able to move into, we've got a 5-drop heavy slot here. We did also look at the Unexplained Disappearance, or potentially a Command the Storm. Like, these are all things that we sort of considered. But all in all, we got this Izzet Guildgate. I figured one of these cards in the Book Devourer, the Inescapable Blaze, the Command the Storm, the Unexplained Disappearance, like, they all seem like at least something was going to be coming back to us. So I grabbed the Guildgate here for fear somebody else might need it. Pack 3, pick 3. This turned out to be probably one of our best picks in the entire draft, was Kraul Harpooner. A 3-2 for 2 is obviously very good in its own right, but then being able to sort of pick off a random flyer was great. Pack 3, pick 4. We had a big beefy thing in the Arboretum Elemental, but this was really more of a convoke strategy. You wanted a lot of little dudes in order to get that out in our 5-drop slot with lots of guys here. I suppose the Killer Among Us probably would have worked, but not really where we wanted to be at. We ended up with a Hypothesizzle, which I thought was a really, really strong card in the first place. You're either drawing 2 cards at instant speed, but you're also discarding things like a Boar later in the game, even a Rubble Belt Maverick, or potentially some Jumpstart card that we're going to pick up later, and dealing 4 damage to an opponent while still getting able to draw the card. This card is busted. It's super good. It was good the first time around. It's good now. Hypothesizzle's great. Pack 3, pick 5. Sonic Assault is the only card we actually can play without a splash. And having just picked up the Hypothesizzle, having a Sonic Assault to discard to it, I thought was particularly good. Pack 3, pick 6. We ended up looking at this Vivid Revival, which I did not think was particularly strong right away, and we were really hoping to wield this Izzet Locket. But then after looking at it again, we had the Hellion, the Hypothesizzle. Getting our Domri back was going to be huge. The Frenzied Airings, also a Rubble Belt Runner, a Sonic Assault, and God forbid we end up pulling back a Doppelgang after end up playing our Vivid Revival. That just would have been absolutely nuts. And so I thought the high end of this card was good enough to play. Pack 3, pick 7. We were looking at either a Siege Worm, which was a little bit much for me, or this Wojek Bodyguard. And I did like the idea of having the 2 Boars as well as the Harpooner, really being able to beat down with this thing quickly. And it turned out that was great. Pack 3, pick 8. We saw lots of like red cards, a couple black ones in here as well. And I wasn't really thrilled with anything. We did have the Dimir Guildgate, which we could have potentially attempted to splash with, but I didn't really want to do that. I wanted this Locket as a second copy of They Went This Way, in order to play on 3 and play our 5-drops on 4. Pack 3, pick 9. We saw Disdainful Stroke. Again, this is kind of a sideboard card that we never ended up getting to pick, but we did see it here. Pack 3, pick 10. We did end up getting the Command the Storm and the Book Devourer back. Seeing the Book Devourer as a 6-drop, I did not think that this was something that we really wanted to play, considering we already had all these 5-drops in here. So Command the Storm, even though it's a 5-drop here, a kill spell after we've already deployed a 5-drop or 2 and stabilized the board, this is what really helped us get in there. This was like our 22nd card, something I think I wouldn't be too thrilled to run back, but was perfectly fine this time around. Pack 3, pick 11. We did get another 2-drop. We played this one. We never activated it, but it was definitely helpful. It was stemming off some of the Boros bleeding early on. Pack 3, pick 12. Nothing here, so we grabbed a Silent Dart. Pack 3, pick 13, an Undercity Uprising, also not playing. Pack 3, pick 14, we did see this Izzet Locket wheel, and we were really happy to replace the Dimir Locket that is down here with the Izzet Locket, so that way we could end up using either blue or red into our 5-drop slot, which was great. And eventually we ended up with Vicious Rumors as the last pick. Taking a look here at the deck, obviously you can see we have a plan, and it's to get to 5 mana, it's to play 5 mana cards. Separating out non-creatures, you can see we actually only have 2 creatures here on 5 with the Rampaging Reinhorn, and we have essentially like a Gruul creatures deck, supplanted here by a couple of big spells that should be able to help those Gruul creatures get in there. Notably also Killer Among Us, worth a bunch of creatures, so our creature count, even though it's only at 13, does feel a little bit better. Plus Domri's able to find those creatures if need be, and Doppelgang able to really go over the top. If you want to have your deck on Run It Back, feel free to go ahead and send me an email at runitbackmtg@gmail.com with the 17 lands data. Otherwise, I'll also be checking Discord periodically for any sort of DMs that come that way as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a good rest of your day.